Good morning. This is Professor Whitaker, and I am trying to get up here. Uh, we will get started here in just a moment. But these are our last two lessons um, of the book of, or the historical book class, and trust that you have um, benefited from these. And I want to apologize as well uh, to I feel very, very badly that um, I feel like I have been running to catch up, and um, because of not knowing that I was going to teach this class until just a week or so before the class started, although I had taught before, but putting it all onto the online setup. And so I feel like I have um, failed you all in some of those regards, and I want you to forgive me for any problems that I caused. Um, and if it was difficult for you the way I did it, I apologize and mean that. I really do. Um, However, I'm trying to do the best that I can, and having to teach a brand new class that I am developing, plus added this class, was quite a daunting task, uh, on top of all of my other obligations. But um, I have enjoyed it, and have enjoyed the comments. And so we're coming down to the last two lessons. Today we're going to, this particular lesson, we're going to deal with the book of Nehemiah. We dealt with Ezra, whose primary goal was to complete the temple. Zerubbabel came back and started the temple, but um, and was building on it. Ezra came and helped complete the temple. Plus, Ezra was a great spiritual leader. He um, reintroduced the book of the laws. He reintroduced the various writings to Israel, and provided a great spiritual revival. The temple was built. A great spiritual revival was on, but the walls of Jerusalem were still in disarray. And we will find in the very first verse of Nehemiah that the word came to Nehemiah, that the first several verses here, that the walls were in disarray, and Nehemiah yearns to rebuild the wall, and he gets permission from the king. And so we start with the book of Nehemiah. So let's do this, and look at this, and go through some of the background of Nehemiah, and then take a trip through the book of Nehemiah as we've done the other books. Again, not in depth. I wish I could. There's so many things I want to say, but can't because of time elements. And but I trust that I've said enough to spur your interest in the historical books, and that you will study into them and delve into the stories, and learn from the leaders that made mistakes, and learn from those that um, we have studied, and learn from the good points, but also learn from the bad points. You know, a lot of times, I know with our parents, we're always looking back, and we have a tendency to want to say, if my parents had done, if my parents had done, and I wish they would have done this, and they did this wrong, and they did that wrong. Instead of hounding them, I would recommend that you take and note what your parents did wrong according to you, and then you do better. Just a thought. Uh, because I have lived long enough, and thankfully I did not have this mentality, but I realized some things that my parents did wrong. My dad worked hard and didn't take time for us when we wanted to go fishing sometimes because he was tired and weary. And I made up my mind that when my children came along, I was going to take that time. And I took more time than my dad took. But now that I've lived, um, let me just relate this. Um, my youngest boy, Brent, when he was still at home, wanted to go horseback riding, wanted to go to a state park and take a horseback ride on one of the trails. And I promised him I would do it. And you know what? It still hasn't happened. And that's something I carry with me. He laughs about it when I tell him about it. But one of these days, and I think I'm going to wait till his kids get a little bit bigger so they can go along, we're going to take that horseback ride. We are. But after living life as well, I soon realized that, I can blame my parents for a lot of things, but unless you're in their shoes, you don't really know fully what all they have gone through. So the same principle applies here. We can hound Saul for his carrying on, and but you know what? I see a lot of leaders following in the steps. So pastors, you know, leaders in Christian circles following along in that proud, I'll do it my way type of an attitude. We don't learn. And so I would challenge you, learn from the mistakes of people that the Bible talks about, and do your best to learn those mistakes, learn their good qualities. And we talk badly about King Saul, but he had some good qualities at first, but he had a major flaw. And so just a bit of wisdom there at the very beginning of this study. So let's delve into the book of Nehemiah. The book of Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther speak of events during the 4th and the 5th centuries BC, when Persia dominated the affairs of Israel. This was a time in which the survivors of Israel's exile were trying to reestablish themselves as a community of faith in and around Jerusalem. These 3 books provided selected glimpses of the Jewish community's struggle to survive under adverse circumstances. In the process, they extend hope to all of God's people in any era where earthly powers threatened their existence. Various obstacles confronted the Jews of the Persian period. Yet, as these 3 books indicate, God had a plan not only to preserve the remnant of his people, but also to shape them into a vital community of faith. And that's important for us to realize, and especially in our day and age. God can help us. God can help us to overcome and shape a vital community of faith. I'm recording this not late at night, but early in the morning. And so I'm still trying to get my juices going. So I'm be sipping on a cup of coffee throughout this. Introducing the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah leads the 3rd and the last return to Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile. Now, it is interesting to note, and let me just push pause here, because there were 3 captivity times. There were 3 exiles to Babylon of Jerusalem. If you go back and read, there were 3 times that that Babylon had to come and take exiles. The last time was final. They did a good enough job that had Judah submitted to the Babylonian leadership, the other two exiles would not have been necessary, but they thought they could rise up and conquer, and they didn't, and created problems. But we have, in the return home to Jerusalem, we have three returns. Zerubbabel, number one. Ezra brought some, number two. And now Nehemiah leads the third and the last return to Jerusalem. Those that did not follow Nehemiah stayed in Babylon. Now, I'm not saying that they did not come, you know, sprinkle in or straggle into Jerusalem after that. I'm not saying that, but a major return to Israel, Nehemiah led the last one. He is concerned for the welfare of Jerusalem and its inhabitants, prompts him to take bold action, granted permission to return to his homeland. Remember, Nehemiah was the cupbearer for the Persian king. He was in the king's presence often. The cupbearer was a man that would taste the king's drink before giving it to the king to make sure that there was no poison. If somebody had come in and put poison in the king's drink or poison on the king's cup, so when he would drink, the cupbearer would be the one, as crazy as it seems, would take a drink first and would see if anything happened to him. This was a high noted position, a highly respected position, but with a grave deal of possibility of dying. Okay, I mean, think about that. Of course, again, it wasn't just always for poison, but he would taste the drink, and if it was not suitable for the king, he would order something else or get some newer ones or whatever. There was more than just, but the poison was the top of it. He was to keep the king from being poisoned. And so if anybody died, it would have been Nehemiah. But apparently this was not the choice. Either they liked Nehemiah, so they didn't want to poison the king's drink. But Nehemiah was granted permission to return back and actually became the governor of Judea. And he came back to rebuild the shattered walls of Jerusalem. In spite of opposition from without and abuse from within, the task is completed in only 52 days, a feat even the enemies of Israel must attribute to God's enabling. A tremendous feat. But again, if you are a leader, or if you are aspiring to be a leader, or you are a new leader, I challenge you to study Nehemiah's delegation. He wasn't just delegating because he wanted to delegate. He wasn't a master delegator, but he saw the work, and there was no way, if he got a band of people and they started building the wall and went around, that it would finish in 52 days. But instead he said, hey, we can have each of the families build their section of the wall. And he divided it into bite-sized accomplishments. Think about that. I mean, when you look at a whole wall of a city, you might say this is an impossible task. Some of you at the very beginning of this semester looked at the reading requirements and all that was involved and said this was impossible. But I've tried to break it up into bite size, and this is what Nehemiah did. And so each family worked on a section. They joined it together, and 52 days it was completed. God enabled the people to build the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. By contrast, the task of reviving and reforming the people of God within the rebuilt walls demanded years of Nehemiah's godly life and his leadership. So some important facts about the book of Nehemiah. The background was Nehemiah was a layperson who became the cupbearer of the king of Persia in the capital city of Susha. The book of Nehemiah is named after its main character, Nehemiah. And the name Nehemiah means comfort of Jehovah. The author is either, and again, we have Jewish tradition has it that Ezra wrote the book, but some of Jewish people also felt that Nehemiah wrote the book. This is supported by the personal memoirs of Nehemiah that's given throughout the book. And so this gives very, very strong evidence for Nehemiah being the author of the book of Nehemiah. But either one of these wrote it. The date of the writing was around 420 BC. The book takes place between 464 and 423 BC, and the place of the writing was Jerusalem. The geography it begins at the palace of Persia, and then also in the city of Jerusalem. The setting is during the reign of Artaxerxes, stepson of Esther. And so Esther has already been on the scene. Technically, if you go chronologically, Nehemiah is the last of the historical books, not aligned that way in our English Bible, but this was the book of Esther has already taken place, and so we have here that Nehemiah is the last of the historical books. The theme of the book of Nehemiah is the book of Nehemiah seeks to show how God favored his people so recently exiled by strengthening their roots in the homeland of Judah in face of all kinds of opposition. This book deals with Judah's political and geographical restoration. Some of the key facts about the book of Nehemiah, the key words here is Jerusalem walls. It's all about rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, and that is important to remember. The key verses is chapter 6, verses 15 through 16, and chapter 8. Verse 8, chapter 9 is the key chapter, and this chapter records the completion of the Jerusalem wall and the nations reaffirming its loyalty to the covenant. The key people, Nehemiah portrays Christ in his ministry of restoration. And I think I may have made a mistake on that one. The key people are actually Nehemiah, Ezra, Sanballat, and Tobiah. Sanballat and Tobiah is actually the enemies of rebuilding the walls and tried their best to create issues. The theme, or Christ, is seen in the book of Nehemiah in the fact that Nehemiah portrays Christ in his ministry of restoration. The contribution to the Bible, Nehemiah fills in our understanding of a period that would otherwise be unclear. Along with Ezra, it provides the background for the post-exile period and the three post-exile prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So when you read those three, you understand that it is all a part of that period there. An interesting way to read the Bible, and I have a copy. I don't have one with me. I'm down at my house again on a Monday. But I have a chronological Bible. And that would be a very interesting way of reading the Bible, because through the studies of First and Second Kings and where it talks about David, it will actually put the Psalms as best they can in chronological order. So if you're reading something and a Psalm of David fits that point, they'll insert that there. And so in this way, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi would be placed in among Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah. So just an interesting, it's out there. It's not that expensive. If you get a hardback copy of it, obviously, if you're a minister, you wouldn't want to preach from that because um, it would be rather interesting, because right in the middle of your passage that you might be preaching from is a complete another psalm or another book of the Bible, and so it would be rather difficult, but it's a great study tool, and I would highly recommend you get one. The one I have is Reese's chronological Bible. I also have a chronological study Bible on ebook and from Kindle, and that was an interesting one. Another interesting study Bible, although it's not the King James, is the Culture and Background Study Bible. And so throughout, as you're reading through that, they will put little bits of culture and background information in there in the bottom of it, and that really, if that intrigues you as it does me, that's an interesting one. And I also have it for ebook, and I got it. I think maybe $5.99. They were running a special, but you can look at some of this and see some of these things. Very, very interesting. Here's the outline, a very simple outline of Nehemiah. And again, as I have in other books, I've not been able to do the Roman numeral A, but this would be Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, AB, AB. And for those of you taking it for credit and you're filling out your study guides, your overview charts rather, you're welcome to use this outline, and you're welcome to use any of the information. Now on this one, the key people, you might want to look at the notes, but you're welcome to use that information as well. Do not recreate something. And my purpose, let me just explain, and I know this is toward the end of the class, but let me just explain that my purpose for that is that you would have something, and I maybe keep it on your computer, but have this handy so that if you're a pastor or a Sunday school teacher or whatever, and you are studying and you want an overview of the book, maybe you're going to do a sermon on Nehemiah or Esther or Ezra and First Kings or Second Kings, First Samuel, Second Samuel, First or Second Chronicles, Judges, whatever. You can pull up these overview and get a quick overview of what that book represents. So that is my main purpose of doing this for you, and I hope it is beneficial to you. Let's look at some of the transitions in the book of Nehemiah. Closely associated with the book of Ezra is the book of Nehemiah, where Ezra was the religious leader in Jerusalem. Nehemiah became the secular leader, although a very godly secular leader, the official governor of the Persian province of Judea. Nehemiah's greatest concern was the ruined state of the city, left without walls since Artaxerxes I had earlier halted the repairs under Ezra. Using his position as a trusted servant in the inner court of Artaxerxes II, Nehemiah obtained permission to resume the labor and complete the walls of Jerusalem. And he began his work in the 20th year of Artaxerxes II's reign. And and there's some discrepancy, and I will let you read those in the notes there, of who actually came first. Some think that Ezra came after Nehemiah, but I'm not going to get into that. The rebuilding of the walls was completed in only 52 days. This span of time occurred during the 5th and the 6th months, known as Ab and Elu, faced with difficult circumstances, but with God's help, they were able to complete. I mean, people caused them problems, oppositions. It was horrible. But even to the point of a threat of war, and Nehemiah had the people strap on their swords and be ready for fighting, and they still completed it. We see in Nehemiah 7 that Ezra reads the law, and it's almost as if at chapter 7 uh, that Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, goes from Nehemiah's personal narrative to the governor's memoir, or this is what he was written, and somebody has put this into book form. And he talks about Ezra reading the law and the reform that happened from the law of God being read. Nehemiah 12, the name Zerubbabel is a Babylonian name, most likely meaning seed of Babylon. Zerubbabel was from the Judean family, but had grown up in Babylon. In his adult years, however, he had the opportunity to return to his ancestral home in Jerusalem. Zerubbabel was actually a descendant of royalty, of David, and his grandfather had been Jehoiachin, the king of Judah. And since Zerubbabel was thus an heir to the throne of David and the rightful king of Judah, some Judeans hoped that Judah might regain some degree of national power under him. But Zerubbabel becomes the governor. Then Nehemiah begins to initiate his own reforms in the book here, and Nehemiah begins to complete and side with Ezra reforms, and really brought about some powerful reforms. He did away with the intermarriage of the people with the Gentiles there, and made some stop the selling and buying on Sunday, and just a lot of things that Nehemiah did. And so Nehemiah 13 basically begins to pick up again with Nehemiah's memoirs as governor, as leader of the province, and again the book ends with Nehemiah really dealing with the foreign wives of the Israelites, and brings about a purity once again to the Jewish and Israeli bloodlines that had become defiled with the intermarriage of other races. Again, an interesting book. I would challenge you to read this book. It is tremendous, and the reforms that are not only the building of the walls, but the reforms and how Nehemiah governed, established policies, and reinstated the priesthood, and just some interesting things that Nehemiah brings about. So I hope this has whet your appetite and challenged you to look into the book of Nehemiah a little bit more. And if you're an aspiring leader, I would challenge you to study the book of Nehemiah. It is a tremendous, tremendous book on leadership that will benefit anyone aspiring leadership and from a biblical point of view. Thank you very much, and may God bless you as you do this week. Your lessons will be due. Let me see. I thought I had my day timer handy. Let me just give it to you real quick. But your lessons are due the 7th, and so we'll have one more video coming out on the 7th, and that week's work will be done on the 14th, and then everything must be completed by the 17th of December. That's a Thursday. So your final exam, and I think I have a study guide up either this week or next week for the final exam, and you should be able to go to files and be able to get that ahead of time and prepare for, make sure that all of your overview charts are in, your final project is all submitted, either uploaded through Populi, or you can send me your um, assignments through email. I will accept that as well. Thank you very much, and God bless.